All right, let's jump right in. Today we're tackling a huge question. It's one of the most common and now one of the most complex decisions any pet owner has to make. We're going to break down all the latest evidence on neutering.
It seems like such a straightforward question, doesn't it? And for decades, the answer was pretty straightforward. But as we're about to see, the science has really moved on, making the when, and maybe even the if, a way more personal decision for you and your furry friend.
Look, it's a huge decision for any owner, and that's exactly why we're digging into this today. That simple one-size-fits-all advice we all used to get? Well, it's pretty much out the window. It's been replaced by a much more nuanced, evidence-based approach. So to really get to the bottom of it, let me show you what we're going to cover. Okay, so first, we'll just cover the basics. What is neutering exactly? Then we'll get into the really strong case for doing it, before we flip the coin and look at the risks and downsides. After that, we're diving headfirst into the great timing debate, which is where things get really interesting. And finally, we'll wrap it all up to help you figure out how to make the right call. All right, section 1, the basics. So what are we even talking about when we use the word neutering? Let's just make sure we're all on the same page. So for female animals, the procedure is called spaying. This is where a vet surgically removes the ovaries, and sometimes the uterus too. Pretty straightforward. For males, it's called castration, which is the surgical removal of both testicles. Now, while the surgical option is by far the most common, it's worth knowing there's also a non-surgical option for males. Some people call it chemical castration. It's temporary, and it can be a way to kind of test out the effects on behavior. Okay, so the big question is, why has neutering been such a standard, almost automatic part of pet care for so long? Well, the reasons are actually pretty powerful, and they've really stood the test of time. Right, the case for neutering has always been built on some really significant health benefits. On a big picture level, it's about controlling the pet population, preventing unwanted litters. But for your individual pet, we're talking about eliminating the risk of some really nasty, life-threatening stuff, like pyometra, a womb infection in females, and testicular cancer in males. Plus, you're massively reducing the risk of other major health issues, and it can help with behaviors like roaming or marking. These are not small things, you know? This is the bedrock, the absolute core reason vets have recommended this for decades. But, and this is a big but, it's not all one-sided. Not anymore. Modern research has really started to paint a much more complicated picture, with some potential risks that we absolutely have to weigh in the balance.
Yeah, this is the other side of the coin. First, you've got the standard surgical risks that come with any procedure. But it goes deeper. We now know that those sex hormones play a huge role in development. So for some of the bigger breeds, neutering too early has been linked to a higher risk of joint problems down the road. And the cancer risk, it's tricky. It's kind of like a double-edged sword. While it gets rid of the risk for some cancers, some studies suggest it might slightly increase the risk for others depending on the breed. And on top of all that, you've got the fact that neutered pets tend to gain weight more easily, and there can even be some behavioral changes. You can see why this isn't a simple yes or no anymore, right? It's a real trade-off.
And this right here brings us to the absolute heart of the modern debate. It's not just if you should neuter anymore. Now it's all about when. And that old advice of just do it as early as possible, yeah, that's definitely not the default answer anymore. Just listen to this. This quote from a huge 2024 review of all the scientific literature. It basically says it all. What these scientists did is called a scoping review. It's a massive undertaking where they map out all the existing evidence on a topic. And what was their conclusion? We just don't have the solid, robust evidence yet to create some kind of universal rule book about timing. The science is literally still evolving as we speak. Okay, so what does this actually mean in practice? Well, for cats, the picture is still pretty clear. To stop unwanted litters, the general consensus from major vet bodies is to neuter them at around 4 months old. But for dogs, oh man, for dogs, it is a whole different ballgame. The decision has become super individualized. And the reason it's so much more complicated for dogs all comes down to one word: puberty. The thing is, the start of puberty in dogs is all over the map. It can be as early as 6 months for a little tiny dog, or way later for a giant breed. And that huge variation is the whole key, because neutering before they're sexually mature versus after can have totally different effects on their development. So, what does a modern game plan actually look like for a dog owner? Well, a lot of vets are now using a framework that's based on size. Step 1 is figuring out your dog's expected adult weight. Now, for the smaller guys, we're talking under about 20 kilograms, the recommendation is often still to consider neutering from 6 months old. But for the big dogs, the advice is now leaning heavily towards waiting until they're at least a year old, sometimes even older. And the reason for that is pretty fascinating. Those sex hormones we talked about, they play a critical role in telling the growth plates in their bones when to close up. So by waiting, you're allowing their skeleton to fully mature, which could, in turn, reduce the risk of those joint problems we mentioned earlier. Okay, so this brings us to the final, and maybe the most important section. How do you take all of this, the pros, the cons, the timing debate, and actually make the best possible decision for your pet? Honestly, if you only take one single thing away from this entire explainer, please let it be this. There is no single best age. There's only a best decision for your individual pet. The whole goal has shifted from finding that one magic right answer to finding the best answer for your animal in your situation.
So the big question is, how do you do that? Well, it all starts with asking the right questions and having a really good, informed conversation. Think of this as your checklist for that really important chat with your vet. You need to talk about your pet's breed and their expected adult size. You'll discuss your own lifestyle and your home environment. You'll go over any health risks that are common for that specific breed. And, of course, you'll talk about your pet's individual behavior and personality. All of these pieces of the puzzle come together to help your vet give you the best possible recommendation. And that right there is the ultimate takeaway. In this new world of evolving veterinary evidence, being an informed, responsible pet owner doesn't mean you have to know a single, simple answer. It just means you need to know the right questions to ask so you and your vet can work through all these complexities together. The conversation itself, that's the real key.